I was mid-sentence when every head in the boardroom turned away from me and toward the door. My slide was frozen behind me, a careful graph showing the final results of my stabilization trials, the work that had kept me in the lab until midnight more nights than I could count. Madison glided in like she owned the place, cream-colored suit, perfect hair, that practiced half-smile she used when she wanted something. She was the CEO's daughter, and lately she walked through the building like it belonged to her, and everyone inside it was just set dressing. She said she was sorry to interrupt me, but there was no apology in her voice. She moved straight to the head of the table, heels clicking on the polished floor, while my hand hovered stupidly over the clicker. 6 investors who had been nodding along with my presentation a minute earlier suddenly sat up straighter for her. Their attention slid off me like I had never been there. She tapped the tablet in her hand. My slides vanished from the big screen. The room went dim for a second, then lit up again with her deck. Different colors, different fonts, but as soon as I saw the first diagram, my stomach dropped. I knew those models. I had sketched them in the lab at 2 a.m. I had written them in a notebook that never left my desk. She told them there had been a change in strategy. She said our team had developed an alternative approach with stronger market potential. She called it bold, disruptive, scalable. Words that executives loved and scientists learned to tolerate. As she walked past me to plug in her laptop, she leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "We don't need your ideas anymore, Nora." For a second, it felt like all the air left my body. Then I realized I was still standing there in front of a wall of glass and money and polite faces pretending not to see me disappear. I shut down my laptop. My hands moved like they belonged to someone else. Cable out. Device into bag. Key card pulled from my wallet and left on the glossy table next to a stack of untouched investor packets. Our CEO, Richard, sat halfway down the table. The man who once told me I was the future of his company stared right through me like I had already resigned months ago. I walked toward the door. As I passed him, I heard myself speak, calm and flat. I told him to enjoy the funding. No one stopped me. No one asked a single question. Behind me, the room broke into applause for Madison's final slide. I made it all the way to my car before my hands started shaking. I wrapped my fingers around the steering wheel and just sat there staring at the dashboard, my heartbeat loud in my ears. 3 years of work. Other people said that as a figure of speech. For me, it was literal. 3 years of 16-hour days, cold coffee, and microwave dinners in the break room. 3 years away from friends, away from any kind of normal life. My process, my data, my future. All repackaged under a new name and delivered by a woman who had never once stayed for a night experiment. And the worst part was not that they stole it. The worst part was realizing they didn't even need me to explain it. Madison had gone through my notes so thoroughly that she could sell my research without me standing there. She had taken everything she needed weeks ago. Today was just the performance. I pulled out of the parking garage on autopilot and drove home, barely seeing the traffic lights. In the back of my mind, numbers were already moving. Login windows. Account balances. Timelines. I knew how long it would take Richard to realize what I had already done. 48 hours, if he moved fast. My apartment felt smaller than usual when I walked in. Quiet. A second later, Milo wound himself around my ankles, his gray tail making lazy circles like nothing in the world was wrong. I scooped him up and pressed my face into his fur. The softness almost broke me. She hadn't just taken a slide deck. She had taken the thing that finally proved I belonged in that building at all. My phone buzzed. A message from Jenna, my closest friend in the lab. She wanted to know what had happened. Everyone was talking. No one had the full story. How was she supposed to understand that I had walked away from everything without a fight? Before I could answer, another notification appeared. This time from Richard. "We need to talk now." The old me would have called him back immediately. Explained. Defended. Begged for a meeting. The version of me who walked out of that boardroom did something different. I powered the phone down and set it face down on the table. Then I opened my laptop. The familiar glow of the screen steadied me. Here, at least, I still knew who I was. I logged into the private drive I had set up months ago, long before Madison arrived with her expensive degree and her empty title. My name is Nora Reed, and I am not the person people picture when they think of a scientific founder. I do not have family money or a famous mentor or a line of awards hanging on my wall. I learned to see patterns by watching my mother scrub other people's kitchens while I did homework at their dining room tables. I learned persistence by working double shifts at a diner and studying in the quiet hours between closing and dawn. 4 years ago, Richard told me fresh perspectives created breakthroughs when he hired me, even though my background was messy and my resume was thin. I believed him. For a while, I thought I had finally found a place where talent could matter more than where you came from. Then his daughter walked in 8 months ago with a made-up title and a corner office, and I watched the way the building bent around her. Meetings moved to fit her schedule. Projects shifted so she could attach her name. People laughed a little louder at her jokes. I should have recognized the warning the first time she leaned against my workstation and told me I was brilliant but naive. That I didn't understand how this industry really worked. She said it like a compliment. I heard it and still handed her my lab notebook when she asked to see the latest data. The investors' meeting had been on the calendar for months. My day. My turn to show that the strange girl from nowhere with the long nights and the bad coffee habits actually had something the world needed. 3 days before the meeting, Madison's questions changed. Less about basic science. More about possible markets. More about phrasing. She wanted to see all my recent notes. She wanted to understand, she said, how to position my breakthrough for maximum impact. I thought she meant for me. Now, sitting at my tiny kitchen table with Milo purring beside my laptop, I saw it clearly. She had never been learning. She had been copying. I pulled up my private files. Everything I had done outside official lab hours lived here: refined models, personal simulations, side experiments I ran at home on borrowed equipment. Things I had always told myself were just backups. Insurance. I opened my banking app next. One quiet transfer had already gone through that morning while I was still hopeful enough to believe the day might go as planned. I confirmed the second one. Clean. Traceable. Legal. Just not convenient for the man who thought my work would always belong to him. By this time tomorrow, Richard was going to realize the gap between what he thought he owned and what he actually had access to. That was when the real storm would begin. I worked until the numbers on the bottom of my screen blurred. Financial records. Email logs. Timestamps. Documentation I had been building for months, without fully admitting to myself why. When I finally stumbled to bed, the room felt like it was tilting. My body was exhausted, but my mind was already running simulations of what tomorrow would look like. Security would still let me in. My resignation had not been official. Richard would be furious. Madison would be panicking behind the smooth mask. The investors would be on their way, expecting to see a miracle. They would see something else instead. As I drifted off, one clear thought cut through the noise. The next time I walked into that lab, I was not going to be the powerless girl at the front of the room. And when Richard finally dragged me into his office to demand answers, he was going to learn the one thing he had never bothered to understand. I was not the one trapped in this situation. The morning after everything collapsed felt strangely calm, like the quiet after a storm that hasn't finished yet. I got ready slowly, no rush, no fear, just a focused kind of stillness. My clothes were neat, neutral. My bag was packed with everything that mattered: my laptop, my files, my proof. The streets were wet from rain when I drove through the city. The sky looked pale and washed out, like the world was waiting to see what would happen next. When I pulled up at the research park, the security guard squinted at me through the glass booth. "Thought you quit yesterday," he said. "Not officially," I answered, trying to sound casual. He frowned, hesitated, then hit the button to raise the gate. His tone was softer when he spoke again. "Good luck, Nora." Inside, the building felt different. Conversations stopped the moment I walked in. People's eyes flicked toward me and then away just as fast, pretending to be busy. I could feel it: the tension, the gossip, the fear of being caught on the wrong side of whatever was coming. At my workstation, I started quietly gathering my things. My coffee mug. My mother's photo. The worn-out notebook that had followed me from one apartment to another. Jenna appeared next to me, whispering fast. "Nora, what did you do?" "Richard's been losing it since last night. He's called meetings every hour. People say you locked the servers." Is that true? I kept pecking. Nothing he didn't deserve. She looked scared. This isn't like you. Just tell me what's going on. Before I could answer, Richard's voice sliced through the air, loud and sharp. Read my office. Now. Every sound in the lab died instantly. Even the machines seemed to stop humming. I walked to his office slowly, feeling every step. When I got there, he was standing behind his desk, red-faced, veins visible in his neck. Close the door, he said. I did. Where is it? He demanded. Where is what? I asked, calm but cold. Don't do this. You know exactly what I mean. The stabilization process. The core data. It's gone. The investors are on their way, and suddenly the system can't run your formula. What did you do? I waited long enough for him to start losing confidence in his own voice. I'm not sure what you're talking about, I said. Yesterday, Madison made it pretty clear my work isn't needed anymore. Her process depends on yours, he snapped. If you don't fix this, we lose everything. Then maybe you shouldn't have let her steal it, I said quietly. His eyes darkened. Fix it, and we'll talk about compensation. A raise. A promotion. Whatever you want. I shook my head. Everything I developed while employed here is still in your system. If it's not working, that's your problem. The door burst open behind me. Madison rushed in, out of breath, her perfect look gone. Dad, she said, the team can't replicate the reaction sequence. The compound keeps collapsing. She stopped when she saw me standing there. What is she doing here? I came to collect my things, I said. You made it clear yesterday that my ideas aren't needed. You did something, Madison hissed. You sabotaged us. That's a serious accusation, I said, sliding my bag over my shoulder. Maybe try using your own innovative approach. Her face went pale. Richard slammed his fist on the desk. Enough. Nora, fix this. You'll get full credit, a better title, whatever it takes. Just make this work. I looked him straight in the eyes. I can't help you. And, honestly, I wouldn't if I could. You're not leaving this room until you fix it, he said, stepping closer. I tilted my head slightly. Are you really planning to stop me, Richard? Because that's a whole new problem for you. He froze. I saw the moment his anger turned into caution. Then, slowly, he moved aside. This isn't over, he said, his voice shaking. It is for me, I said. You made sure of that yesterday. I walked out. The room behind me stayed silent except for the sound of Madison's breathing, quick and shallow. The hallway felt long and bright, my footsteps echoing against the polished floor. Every pair of eyes followed me. Nobody said a word. Halfway to the door, I heard Madison's voice crack behind me. She sabotaged us. She must have. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Outside, the air hit my face like a shock. Cold, sharp, clean. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Jenna. What did you do? Everyone's freaking out. Madison's crying. Richard's threatening to fire half the team. I didn't answer. I stood at the edge of the parking lot, staring up at the glass tower that had once felt like my entire future. Sunlight bounced off the windows, too bright, too perfect. Inside, everything was already collapsing. 5 minutes later, a line of black cars pulled into the lot. Ethan Blake and the investors. Expensive suits, confident smiles. They had no idea the world they were about to walk into was already burning. 10 minutes after that, my phone rang. Unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again. Same number. This time I answered. Nora Reed, I said. A voice came through, calm but tense. This is Ethan Blake. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Where are you? Close enough. Meet me at the coffee shop across the street. 5 minutes. He hung up. I looked at my reflection in the car window, tired eyes, calm face, nothing left to lose. Then I smiled. Inside the cafe, Ethan sat in the corner, jacket off, tie loosened, trying to look composed. I ordered coffee, took my time, and sat across from him. He didn't wait. What happened in there? You'll have to be more specific, I said. Yesterday, Madison presents a world-changing process. Today, nothing works. Richard's in full panic. What's going on? That sounds stressful, I said, stirring my coffee slowly. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. 6 investors are ready to walk away from an $80 million deal. I need answers. I tilted my head. And what do you want from me? I want you to fix it. Make the process work. We'll make it worth your while. I don't work there anymore. That can change, he said. You were making around 100,000, right? We'll triple it. Plus stock options. A title. Whatever you need. I smiled faintly. You're negotiating with the wrong company, Ethan. His frown deepened. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not interested in going back to work for Richard Cole. Then what do you want? You're investing in a molecular stabilization process, right? One that could revolutionize drug delivery? He nodded slowly. And now, that process doesn't work. No, it doesn't. That would worry me too. He sat back, studying me. You're behind this, aren't you? I smiled, finishing my coffee. You should be careful where you invest your money. Especially when the people selling the product don't actually understand it. I stood up. If you want to see something that really works, call this number at 3 o'clock. I handed him a plain white card. No logo, no name. Just a number. Then I left him sitting there, staring at it like it might explode. Outside, the air felt clearer. Lighter. I walked back to my car and sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. It was only 11 a.m., and already the cracks were spreading. By the time the clock hit 2:30, I knew Richard wouldn't send an assistant. He'd come himself. And that was exactly what I wanted. By 2:30, the quiet in my apartment felt heavy, like the silence before an explosion. The documents were ready, my files encrypted, and my laptop waiting on the table beside a half-empty cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I knew he'd come. People like Richard never sent someone else when their control slipped, they had to grab it back themselves. When the doorbell rang, I didn't move right away. Milo lifted his head from the couch, ears twitching toward the sound. The security camera showed what I already expected, Richard standing on the doorstep, alone, shoulders tense, eyes hard. His car idled at the curb, engines still running. I opened the door without a word. He stepped inside like he owned the space, scanning my apartment, the stack of journals on the counter, the papers covering my small desk, the faint smell of coffee and solder from my equipment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The investors walked out, he said finally. His voice didn't sound like his. It was lower, rougher, stripped of the usual arrogance. I'm sorry to hear that, I answered. No, you're not. He looked at me, searching for something, fear, guilt, regret. I gave him nothing. You planned this, he said, his tone flat. I planned to protect myself, I said. That's all. You don't get to rewrite this, Nora. You worked for my company. Everything you developed belongs to us. I smiled slightly, calm but tired. Then why can't your team make it work? He stared at me for a long moment, realizing I wasn't bluffing. Then his voice softened, almost pleading. Come back. We can fix this. You'll get credit this time. Full partnership. Whatever you want. I studied him carefully, this man who once told me I was the future of his company and now stood in my living room like a desperate stranger. Why would I trust you now? Because without you, everything collapses. The company, the funding, the patents, all of it. So you mean everything I built while you took the credit? He flinched, but didn't deny it. What do you want, Nora? I want you to leave. Be reasonable, he said, taking a step closer. We both lose if you do this. No, Richard. Only you lose. I glanced at my watch. 3 o'clock was getting close. I had somewhere else to be. He narrowed his eyes. Who are you meeting? That's not your concern anymore. He straightened, trying to rebuild what was left of his authority. You can't take our research to a competitor. I didn't take anything that belongs to your company, I said. And you know it. Then why can't we replicate your process? Because you don't understand it. Because Madison never did. And because you never cared to learn. I walked to the door and held it open. He hesitated, anger flickering back across his face. You think you've won? This isn't over. I looked at him steadily. Maybe not for you. His phone started ringing before he could respond. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting from fury to alarm. Without another word, he stepped outside, answering the call as he left. The door closed behind him. For a moment, I stood still, my back pressed to the cool wood, breathing slow and deep. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer release of tension. Years of loyalty, of long nights and endless compromises, had just ended with one final conversation. At exactly 3 o'clock, my phone rang again. Ethan Blake. Have you decided if you're interested in seeing something that actually works? I asked. I'm listening, he said. But I'm not alone. Who's with you? The entire investment group. After this morning, we need clarity. Text me the address, I said. I'll bring everything you need to see. 2 hours later, I stood in a private conference room high above the city. The view stretched out over the skyline, sharp and distant. Around the table sat 6 investors, calm, composed, but clearly restless. No Richard. No Madison. Just me and the truth. Before I begin, I said, setting my laptop on the table, I want to be clear. What you're about to see belongs to me, not to Cole Biotechnics. That's not what we were told, Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. I imagine a lot of what you were told yesterday won't hold up under scrutiny. I began my presentation, each word deliberate, each demonstration exact. I showed them the process as it truly worked, the stabilization curve, the reaction sequence, the control data. When I finished, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Ethan spoke first. This is incredible work, Nora. But it raises serious questions. I can answer them, I said. But first, I need to know if you're interested in funding the real innovation, not the imitation you saw yesterday. A woman near the end of the table, Sophia Nguyen, studied me thoughtfully. Are you saying you've already established your own company? I have, I said. Apex Meridian Labs. Formed 3 weeks ago. Ethan's eyebrows lifted. 3 weeks? Before yesterday's presentation? I nodded. I saw which way things were heading. And the intellectual property? Sophia asked. All developed independently. My own resources, my own time. I can prove it. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were timestamps, data logs, signed legal statements from my counsel, every document meticulously organized. Ethan flipped through it slowly, his expression unreadable. You've been preparing this for months. I've been protecting myself, I said. That's different. Sophia glanced up. What happened this morning then? Why couldn't their team reproduce the results? Because they never understood the process, I said. They had access to my results, not my methodology. Madison knew what the destination looked like, but not how to get there. The investors exchanged quiet looks across the table. I could feel the weight of their thoughts. Money, credibility, reputation, all of it now tied to a decision they had to make carefully. Finally, Ethan leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership, I said. Apex Meridian Labs develops the technology independently. You invest directly with us. No middlemen, no inflated corporate layers, no nepotism. Just science. And your team? Sophia asked. 4 people, including me. Every one of them left Cole Biotechnics in the past year. She gave a small nod. You've been planning your escape for some time. Not an escape, I said. A correction. The man sitting beside Ethan folded his arms. What makes your process different from what we saw yesterday? I smiled faintly. Think of traditional medicine delivery as throwing darts in the dark. Some hit the target, most don't. My process turns those darts into guided precision. The compound stays stable until it reaches exactly where it's needed, then activates on contact. So this could revolutionize chemotherapy delivery, Ethan said slowly. That's the first step. But the platform could extend far beyond that. The room fell quiet again. This time, it wasn't skepticism, it was calculation. We'll need independent verification, Sophia said finally. Of course, I replied. You'll have full access to the data. Ethan nodded. In the meantime, we'll suspend our discussions with Cole Biotechnics. As I packed my things, Ethan walked with me to the door. Richard called me 6 times today, he said quietly. He claims you stole from him. That's projection, I said. He stole from me. You knew this would happen, didn't you? I met his eyes. I didn't plan it. I just saw the pattern. And I acted before it was too late. As I left the building, my phone buzzed again, messages flooding in from Jenna. Total meltdown, she wrote. Richard's losing it. Madison's crying in her office. Everyone's terrified. What did you do? I didn't answer. Some lessons teach themselves. Outside, the city lights flickered on as the sun dipped below the skyline. For the first time in months, I felt a strange, unfamiliar calm. The power I had lost in that boardroom had found its way back to me, not through revenge, but through proof. Through truth. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Richard would fight. Madison would try to recover what she'd lost. But this time, they'd be fighting on my terms. And that made all the difference. By sunrise the next morning, the industry already knew something had gone terribly wrong at Cole Biotechnics. Every blog, every investment forum, every insider feed was buzzing. The company's miracle innovation, Madison's so-called alternative process, had failed live in front of investors. Word spread fast in our field, and failure always attracted attention. I woke up to a dozen notifications lighting my phone. Jenna had sent most of them through the night. Richard fired Luke, she wrote. Said he was responsible for the data breach. Madison hasn't been seen since the meeting. The whole place feels radioactive. I lay there staring at the screen for a moment, the weight of it all finally hitting me. For years, I had walked into that building every morning, convinced I was lucky just to be there. Now, the same walls were closing in on the people who'd built their reputations on my work. Milo jumped onto the bed, pressing his soft head into my arm. I scratched behind his ears and whispered, "We did it, little guy." My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then came a voicemail alert. When I played it, Richard's voice filled the room, sharp, brittle, desperate. "You think this is over, Nora? You've made a serious mistake. You can't just walk away with what's mine." He hung up before finishing the sentence. I stared at the wall, feeling nothing. The threat wasn't new. It was predictable, the same arrogance that had guided him for years, now stripped bare. By mid-morning, my lawyer called. Richard's team had filed an emergency injunction claiming I had stolen proprietary research. The judge denied it within hours. The documentation I'd provided weeks earlier had done its job. "He's floundering," my lawyer said. "He's acting out of panic, not logic. Expect more attempts like this, but we're prepared." Prepared. That word finally meant something. Around noon, Jenna texted again. Richard's board is calling an emergency session. Madison's locked herself in her office. People are quitting in waves. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and began refining my slides for the follow-up meeting with the investors. Apex Meridian Labs wasn't just a file name anymore, it was real. I had the funding interest, the patents pending, the proof. All that was left was to build. That night, I stayed late at the small rented lab space we were using. The equipment wasn't fancy, but it worked. The smell of disinfectant, the quiet hum of machines, the faint flicker of fluorescent lights, it all felt like home in a way Cole Biotechnics never had. At 10:30, the security monitor chimed. Someone was at the door. I glanced at the screen and froze. Madison. Her face looked different, pale, exhausted, stripped of the confidence that used to fill every inch of her posture. Her hair was pulled back hastily. Her clothes were wrinkled. Even from the monitor, I could see she'd been crying. Against my better judgment, I buzzed her in. She stepped inside carefully, glancing around the lab like she couldn't believe this small space was real. "This is it?" she said softly. "This little lab? This is what destroyed us?" I turned away from my workstation. "You destroyed yourselves. I just didn't go down with you." She dropped her purse onto the nearest counter and sank into a chair. "My father won't speak to me. The board removed me this morning. Everything's gone." I leaned against the table, watching her. "What did you expect? You presented work you didn't understand and claimed it as your own." "I didn't steal it," she said quickly, then stopped, catching herself. "I adapted it." I shook my head. "Science doesn't reward shortcuts, Madison. You thought confidence was enough. But this," I gestured around, "this takes work." She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed but defiant. "How did you know it would fall apart? How did you plan all of this?" "I didn't plan your collapse," I said. "I planned my survival. You just made it easier." She stared at the floor. "The investors are with you now, aren't they? They're investing in real science, not presentations." Her voice cracked. "They won't go back to us. Even if I'm gone, it's too late. The damage is permanent. Trust," I said quietly, "doesn't rebuild once it's broken." Madison stood suddenly, wiping her eyes. "I didn't come here for pity. I came because I need to understand. You were nobody. How did you win? I smiled faintly. Because while you were studying my notes, I was studying you. She froze, realizing what that meant. I learned how you think. What you value. What you fear. You wanted admiration, validation, control. You never cared about the science. That's why you lost. Madison looked like she might argue, but no words came out. After a moment, she turned toward the door. You planned this from the beginning, she said quietly. No. I just created options while you and your father destroyed yours. She didn't look back as she left. The door shut softly behind her, leaving the lab silent except for the faint whir of machinery. I stood there for a long time, letting the reality sink in. The war was over. I hadn't just survived, I'd won. But instead of joy, what I felt was something heavier. The emptiness that follows when the fight that's defined your life suddenly ends. My phone buzzed again. A message from Jenna. The company's stock just dropped 15%. Richard's being investigated by the board. Everyone's panicking. What did you do? I typed a simple reply. I told the truth. Then I set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the city glowed in the distance, 100 small lights, each one belonging to someone still fighting for their place. Milo brushed against my leg, his tail curling like a question mark. I bent down and lifted him into my arms, whispering softly, "It's done." But deep down, I knew Richard wasn't finished. People like him never surrendered quietly. He'd try again in court, through the press, maybe even through the investors. And when he did, I'd be ready. Because this time, the power wasn't his anymore. It was mine. The next morning started with the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, all from numbers I recognized and some I didn't. Richard was clearly in damage control mode. I ignored them and focused on my coffee, letting the silence of my apartment stretch out until it felt peaceful again. Jenna was the first person I called back. Her voice came through tight and urgent. "Nora, it's chaos here. Richard fired half the senior staff this morning. He threw a chair at the conference room wall. People are walking out in groups. Is anyone hurt? Physically? No. Professionally? Everyone's done. The investors pulled out completely. He's finished, Nora. Whatever you did, it worked." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, to enjoy the justice of it all. But mostly I felt tired. Like I'd been holding my breath for 3 years and still couldn't quite exhale. Later that afternoon, I met Jenna at a quiet restaurant on the other side of town. No one from the company ever came here. The place was small, dimly lit, with old jazz music humming in the background. She looked drained, her hair tied up carelessly, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. "You look like you haven't slept," I said. "Neither have you," she replied. Then she leaned forward. "Tell me everything." I took a sip of my coffee before speaking. I protected my work, that's all. I documented everything. I made sure they couldn't claim what they didn't understand. Jenna stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "And now you're starting your own company, aren't you?" I nodded. "Already started. 3 weeks before the presentation." She blinked. "You saw it coming that early?" "I saw the signs," I said. Madison's questions. Richard's sudden interest in commercial strategy. I've learned to read patterns. Jenna smiled faintly, half admiration, half disbelief. "You're incredible. You know that, right?" "No. Just careful." She hesitated. Then, softly, "Is there room for another scientist?" I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to happiness. "I thought you'd never ask." The next few weeks moved faster than I expected. The investors from the private meeting confirmed their intent to fund Apex Meridian Labs. Ethan Blake handled most of the communication himself, direct, efficient, no theatrics. He called one morning with a tone that gave away more than he intended. "The board at Cole Biotechnics has voted to remove Richard as CEO," he said. "They've lost confidence." "I'm not surprised," I told him. "They're asking about you." "About me? As a possible replacement?" I laughed quietly. "I'm flattered, but no. I'm done working under anyone else's name." "That's what I told them," he said. "But they asked anyway." A week later, the funding contract arrived. $60 million in initial capital, with additional performance-based clauses that could double it. I read through every line twice, made my notes, then signed. When the documents came back countersigned, I sat in silence for a long minute, just letting the weight of it settle in. Apex Meridian Labs wasn't just an idea anymore. It was real. That afternoon, I went to the new facility, a modest but functional building near the river, with clean white walls and the faint hum of new equipment being unpacked. Jenna and two other scientists, both of whom had left Cold Biotechnics after the fallout, were already there. The lab smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Jenna was calibrating the centrifuge when I walked in. She looked up and smiled. "It's all happening, isn't it?" "It is," I said. The others waved, their faces bright with something I hadn't seen in years at my old job, genuine excitement. Not fear. Not politics. Just curiosity and drive. We spent the next several hours setting up, labeling samples, running early trials. For the first time since Madison stole my presentation, I felt grounded again. Late that night, when everyone else had gone home, I stayed behind. The lab was quiet except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. The glass walls reflected the glow of city lights outside. On my desk sat a small package, no return address. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, was a notebook. My notebook. The one that had gone missing months earlier. There was a short note tucked inside in Richard's handwriting. "You've won. Was it worth it?" I stared at the words for a long time, then closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf. Was it worth it? I thought about the sleepless nights, the long hours, the betrayal, the humiliation. And then I thought about this lab, about the small team downstairs, about the chance to build something new, something honest. "Yes," I whispered. "It was worth it." I powered down the lights, leaving the lab bathed in a faint blue glow from the safety monitors. Before walking out, I paused by the door and looked back one last time. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. A life rebuilt from the ground up. And tomorrow, we'd start the real work, not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove what we were capable of all along. Still, deep down, I knew Richard wasn't done. Men like him never truly let go. They always come back for one more fight. And when he did, I'd be ready. 2 weeks later, the story of Cold Biotechnics' collapse hit every major news outlet. The headlines were brutal. CEO ousted after research scandal. Investor confidence crumbles. Innovation built on lies. Richard's empire had fallen, not because of me, but because the truth finally caught up to him. Madison had disappeared from the industry entirely. Rumors said she'd left the country. I didn't care enough to check. Apex Meridian Labs, on the other hand, was thriving. Our first official trial showed results beyond expectations. Ethan called that evening to confirm the next round of funding. He sounded lighter this time, almost proud. "You've done something remarkable, Nora." "No," I told him. "We did." After we hung up, I stood alone in the lab for a while, letting the quiet settle. The machines hummed softly, steady and alive. Across the room, Jenna was laughing with one of the new interns. The sound carried through the glass walls like a reminder that this was mine now. My work. My space. My rules. When I finally stepped outside, the air smelled clean and sharp, like a new beginning. The city skyline glowed in the distance, lights flickering like tiny victories. I thought about the woman I'd been the day Madison interrupted my presentation, scared, small, unsure. And then about the woman standing here now, calm, certain, untouchable. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about rebuilding myself higher than they could ever reach. I unlocked my car and glanced back at the building one last time, its sign glowing faintly in the night. Apex Meridian Labs. It still felt unreal, but it was real, every inch of it built from the ashes of what they tried to take. I smiled, started the engine, and drove off into the city lights, finally free. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below and don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.